Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Make Things Better podcast. I have Allan with me today. Welcome to the first ever episode. How are you doing today?
All right. I am boiling in my room, but I'm all right. All right today. It's a Friday. It's always good.
Yeah, I think it's the best day to do a podcast because got a couple of hours now. We'll just have a pretty laid back chat and then hopefully we're kind of done for the week, really. Have you been able to get out much in the weather this week?
Apart from a run this morning, no. I got too much work to do.
That's the right answer. Given that this is like the Hive IT podcast and we are both working for Hive, that should probably be my answer as well. I managed to get out for like a few walks now and then, but most of the time I've just been sort of on my laptop roasting in my apartment. It is really hard.
Hear that, Hive directors? We're working really hard. We don't even leave the house.
This podcast is literally for Hive, so it is important that we make sure people know we're doing our job. But this podcast then, what's it about really? So Make Things Better, that's the name of the podcast. It's through Hive IT. I think the first question really should be, who are Hive IT? You've obviously worked there for like 5 years, right? So can you tell us a little bit about Hive IT and sort of just what the general crack is working for Hive?
I still don't even know. I think Hive IT are a digital agency. And we work, we try to work ethically. That is our motto. So we always try to be honest and transparent when we do things. And yeah, we do get things wrong from time to time, but we're always honest about who we are. I guess in the tech industry, there's a lot of jargon bandied about, stuff that makes people feel smaller for not knowing it. So like, what, you don't know how to use this, or you're using some old technology, or you're using a browser from 1996. It kind of looks down on people who might not have the time to be an expert in technology. And I suppose Hive are the type of people that won't look down on you and help you go through things and try and explain things in plain English, because not everyone can be an expert in tech, and you just need help. But yeah, I think Hive just does that. I think in a nutshell, we do a lot of tech for good. Just stick that in there. Plug. So we work with a lot of charities and a lot of stuff like that. And we will avoid working with things that maybe say are controversial.
Yeah, I think that's a great description really of Hive. Sounds to me like, well, the first like few weeks at Hive, because I only joined sort of probably about 30 days ago today. I think it was 4th of May. And yeah, my impression straight away was like, it's just a lot more kind of friendly and like sort of human-centered, some sort of compassion being at the heart of our work. And obviously we have people who are like amazing at using various sort of technology, which I don't even have a clue about, like some of the software engineers, the work they're doing, I just wouldn't know what they're really getting up to be honest. But it does seem like sort of having that human-centered approach is kind of at the core. So it's like really trying to figure out, understand our clients and the people that we work with, understand their needs. So yeah, that does sound like a bit of a plug, but I mean, so far that's what it seems to me.
It's not only like our clients and our friends, essentially. We do build up relationships with them, but it's also about, I think this is one of the few companies where I feel that the company genuinely cares about staff and how we feel and how we're feeling every day. So, our mental health is looked at, or whether we're being overworked is looked at. It's a big thing, crunch in the tech industry these days. You've got a deadline, you've got to work. But it's been good because our company lets us train the way we want, move in different directions. And I think that's the other side that I don't think everyone can see. But when you're working with them, you will start to find out, like, you may start as a PM and turn into a UX designer or something, like, if that is what you want to do. That's the other half. I feel like I'm towing the company line, but really not. This is off the top of my head.
Yeah, it does sound like we've kind of prepared this episode just to like plug Hive and talk about how it's such an excellent company to work for, but that wasn't really the intention at all. But yeah, just I guess we're new to this podcasting, and I'm sure most episodes we'll be talking about more specific topics and not just how amazing Hive is. But yeah, it's good to talk about that. And I do feel quite lucky really to work for Hive, because like literally about a month or two ago, my business kind of fell apart and I was like, what do I do now? And then I just got quite lucky really with the founder of Hive listening to my previous podcast on a completely different topic and sort of getting in touch, and here I am today. But anyway, so our sort of intentions for this podcast then, I think it is just to kind of talk about how technology is changing and sort of delving in deeper and exploring various topics which are quite current to do with design and technology, being a little bit more mindful perhaps. That's kind of the direction I'd like to go in. Why do you think that's important right now, Allan? Sort of exploring and sort of understanding things in a bit more detail to do with tech, rather than just focusing on the sort of superficial level of, right, this goes here, this is how you can improve tech, blah, blah, blah.
I think we're coming to a crossroads of tech being so integrated into our lives these days, from our phones to our consoles to our laptops, to even just going to a coffee shop nowadays. Tech is so integrated, and because it's become so part of our culture now, we need to understand its impact and its effect on us, and our effect and impact on it. I mean, like, there's already studies coming out about biases on particular tech and particular data. There's a whole culture around it that we've moved on from being very functional. So that, as you said, like plug in A, plug in B, get C. We need to now look at, add a bit of emotion to tech, I guess. What makes us happy? What puts us off? What makes us anxious? And with the COVID recently, everyone suddenly realized that, yeah, tech can be really good for keeping families together in unfortunate times. Yeah, it's not ideal, but you can see that a lot of these things are improving because it is becoming us now. And I don't want to say we're becoming it, like some sort of android of the future, but yeah, I think that's the key. And there now needs to be a philosophy around it, a culture, a way of thinking, a manifesto almost of how we move forward with tech.
Yeah, absolutely. I think an important point you raised there was kind of how we are sort of becoming technology. It's becoming so integrated in our lives, but the way in which we use technology to like maybe speak to our families during the coronavirus or speak to our friends, it's not replacing that human interaction in real life. I was out in Portugal for a while for the first few months of the coronavirus, and me and my friends would try and have like a sort of Friday night quiz. And every time I joined that, there'd be like 10 of us on the quiz. And don't get me wrong, it'd be maybe a bit of a laugh and there'd be some like funny jokes and whatever. But it was just absolutely nothing like our time spent in real life. You know, it just wasn't as fun. And, you know, you'd be drinking alone in your apartment. And at the end of the night, when the quiz is over, it's like, what do I do now? And so I think it's really important that technology doesn't replace our like real life sort of connections with people and getting on. And so like now, what's going to come out of the coronavirus, it seems, is like a lot more people are going to work from home, but that may not always actually be a better thing. For some people, that's going to be like quite problematic, because I think a lot of friendships and a lot of communities are built through the workplace. Like a lot of people's friends do come one way or another through work. And so if everyone starts working from home, are we going to become even more isolated and lonely? And like loneliness is a huge problem nowadays. So I think that's another sort of problem with technology, and another topic that maybe I'll explore through this podcast in the future as well.
I think you make a good point of people, if we move all working from home, what happens to the office culture and stuff like that. But I think, as great as humans are, that it will evolve. So our city centers will become less office blocks. So we're living at home. I think there's a lot of people that enjoyed working from home because they had more family time, they got their commuting time back. And then, yeah, because of COVID, we didn't have the sort of social spaces we used to have. But once those open up and we work from home, we could have more social spaces for us to be able to intermingle. So it's almost like we're adapting to a situation, changing it up, being a little more healthier. So now work is less stressful because you don't have to do the commute. And you could take those 2 hours and you could spend the time with your kids, or you could spend time with families and family members at the pub even, or the pub around the corner. So I think it really benefits smaller towns and little communities, which have been neglected by the big cities, which is the other side of things. You'll notice if I'm ever on this again, that I will take the opposite of whatever someone says on anything. I apologize.
No, that's good, because if someone has something to say that's the opposite of me, I'm going to learn from that. If you were just to agree with everything that I said, I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to get anywhere. And so I think to kind of balance points of view is just so important. And that's another thing that's going to make for another podcast one day. So the polarization, which has been caused, the sort of binary yes or no way of social media nowadays. That will make for a good episode one day as well, because that's another problem that we have with technology. We saw it with like the American election and Brexit as well. I was watching a documentary the other week about how all of these like campaigns on Facebook actually led to some of votes going one way or the other, which is crazy as well. I think just to have conversations with people, understand topics in a bit more detail, and to not be so yes or no is just so important in this day and age. So that's another thing that I'm sure we'll explore in the future. Anyway, we'll start to talk a little bit more about maybe your experience in design and talk about what you do as well, if you like. So yeah, first of all, how did you actually get into design, and maybe why did you want to get into design as well?
Such a massive subject. How and why I got into design. Honestly, I think I remember my design technology teacher as a young kid telling me I had no future in design and I should do something else. Good teacher, good teacher. And I think that just made me determined to go. I think I've always enjoyed storytelling. I think storytelling was always a big part of my life, and I enjoy films and I enjoy like animations, and I enjoy the whole process of storytelling. And I find design is just a means of storytelling for myself. I guess that's where the inspiration started. I was going to take psychology because I was also interested in the way people behaved around stuff, how people interacted with things, why people interacted with things, what goes through their head at a particular time. It fascinated me. And so those two things sort of clashed together to become design. And so I just went to art school when I came to this country when I was 18. So yeah, I went to school in the Middle East for most of my life, and then came here for uni. But I had to spend 3 years here because you need to be in the country for 3 years to get your student loan. So I decided to go to art college for 3 years, and then uni, and then the usual pass through, and then got hit by the recession. So I ended up serving coffee for a couple of years. And then, knowing that jobs were tough in design and very competitive, I decided that maybe I needed to create my own job for a bit. So freelancing and doing bits and pieces helped build a portfolio up. Then I got my big break in data visualization for a government company. So data viz is making, people say it's like making graphs pretty, but it's taking what looks like a spreadsheet of loads of numbers and then quickly graphing them up and then going, so how do people look at these graphs? What information do they want to get out of it? What are they looking for? Those type of things. And then redesign the graph around that person's interpretation. So, putting things in order or alphabetical or in stages of size. And I think that was my biggest selling point. And then I got a lot of people just wanting diagrams and data visualizations for complicated things, so that people who aren't experts in it would understand what those things were. And then I went through various jobs as, working in After Effects for a video company, and just jumping from job to job, just not finding my niche. And then I think I spotted Hive's ad, and I jumped in. I didn't have any tech knowledge. Well, I didn't know how to code very well, didn't have any technological skills, so to speak, but I did have a design brain stuck on me, and that helped a lot. Just that problem solving and making I think my first project at Hive, I managed to break immensely because I didn't know much about coding, and I broke the whole thing, and had to go up to the client and say I broke the whole thing as well. So that was fun for the first few.
What happened with breaking your project? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, so I was unsure how this whole. I was very new to sort of HTML coding and CSS and Sass and doing that, and then using a compiler. So this is a thing that sort of takes what you've written and then rewrites it in a format that's much neater. As much it does magic to it, and then it stucks and makes website looks nice. But then I think I was just inexperienced. I was new. I was unwilling to ask for help because I thought I could do it, which was a mistake. I should have just asked for help. And I managed to upload it and then break the whole website completely, and basically had to call in one of the directors to help me out of that situation and clear it all up, backtrack through everything I've done. So I learned from that situation. Ask for help. That's one advice I always say. Just ask for help. Don't be so proud of yourself or precious, whatever. Just ask for help.
Yeah. How did you feel at the time when that went wrong?
I didn't know where to turn, and I had to tell the client as well why we hadn't hit deadline as well. But I think admitting to the problem and asking for help was probably the two big things, because I panicked, obviously. But now I guess just being older, I guess maybe that's the case, but I am happy to sort of fail quickly on a project. So get things wrong really quickly is much better for me. It means I can get those out of the way, because you never hit things on the first try. Anyways, when you're a young designer, you think that's how it is. Like, you looked at all the other designers and they always put all their beautiful designs up, and you're like, what? Every time I make something, it doesn't look like that. But what they don't tell you is that's probably their like 10,000th attempt at that one thing, and they've iterated, and it's changed so much over the time. But yeah, if you're a young designer, yeah, just keep at it, hacking away at it, because that's why I didn't realize till late.
Yeah, well, it's great to hear, because obviously you're doing great work now. Like, I've seen some of the stuff that you've done, and I'm just like, I wish I could do that one day, because I'm very new to design, really. But it's good to hear that like you did kind of have that crash at first on one of your projects, because it'll help people understand, like, right now someone could be going through something a bit difficult at work, for example, or they might have just broke a client's project, and they might have to tell them that. But it's like, well, it's not the end of the world. Sometimes we can get so like stuck in the present, and obviously it's good to be like mindful and aware of what's going on right now. Due to maybe, I don't know, perhaps recency bias, you kind of value negative circumstance in the present more than actually what's going on over a longer period of time. And like over time, obviously things have really worked out for you at Hive, and it's going okay now. Can we go back to what you were saying about kind of how you first got into design, and you was at school, a teacher said you weren't great, and so on. So what I wanted to ask was a little bit about, actually, if you don't mind me asking anyway, like where you grew up, how you ended up in the Middle East, and so on, because I've just not asked you anything about this so far. So I'm just quite curious, really.
Oh, it's always a long story whenever someone asks, and I was like, right, let's start from the beginning. So yeah, so my dad's from Plymouth, and he grew up to be a doctor and decided to work abroad, and that's where he met my mum, who was Filipino at the time. So they got together. So they met in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and then had me. And that's where I spent most of my years growing up, except during the Gulf War, which I was evacuated to the Philippines for a year, just, well, for obvious reasons. And then came back. So I went to school. I've gone to school. I've gone to a load of different schools. I used to go to a sort of, I guess, a British international school for the first part of my life. So all the way to enter year 9, I think. And then during those years, I spent a year in Philippines, like during the Gulf War, and I went to school there at a local school. Just had a mud path. In fact, most of it was mud. I remember that. And then after year 9, I was sent to the American International School in Saudi, and then finished out and graduated high school from there. And I guess, yeah, and then I moved to the UK at 18 and tried to figure out my path here, which was difficult because I didn't have I didn't even have a national insurance number. So I had to basically go in and ask for one so I could get a job, so I could pay for stuff, which was tough. And yeah, I think I had to do a lot of stuff by myself from that point onward. Parents were still abroad, so it was a lot of me trying to figure out who I am, what I'm doing, is this the right path, am I making a mistake? So yeah, and then I grew up in Newcastle. So my dad used to teach in Newcastle, and I grew up there. Well, I grew up supporting Newcastle because my dad was there for a while, but we didn't spend much time there. And I spent 3 years there. Then I moved to Sheffield and stayed at Sheffield because I moved around a lot, and I only ever had friends for, I think, through my life over 3 to 4 years. So I didn't really have long-term relationships with people. Everyone was very temporary. So it's only been recently that I've actually got like a set of friends that have lasted longer than a few years.
Yeah. Well, I can sort of understand that, because I think a lot of people in the UK make their friends either through like university or through their friends from school as well. If you've like grown up in a different area of the world, it's going to be quite difficult to kind of form longer lasting relationships with people sort of, well, like obviously from your school, like you won't have really been able to do that. Like that is difficult. Like my mum was the same. Like she went to about 5 or 6 different schools when she was younger. So I don't think she's got like many friends from her schools anyway. But obviously as you get older, you just make a lot more friends sort of in your area and so on, which is good. My other question then, this was one that I was thinking about, I think last night, is you talked a little bit how you want to like tell sort of stories, you like the storytelling aspect of design. Do you think now in like 2021 you have a much better, I think you do anyway, but you might counter me. I personally think anyway that you have a much better opportunity to sort of express yourself and be creative through design than ever before, because we have so many tools to do so, but a lot of those tools are online. So as a sort of artist, do you think you have more ways to express yourselves now than before, or not?
We have different ways of expressing ourselves now than before. Yes, I think all new software's democratized it a bit. So like everyone has a chance at jumping in and creating something amazing. So I think having access to higher standard equipment and software allows a person to create that amazing piece of work. But I think we've always had the humble pencil and some coloring pencils. We've always had the crayons. So people could be really creative and create that. We've had paint for ages, and you can create loads of stuff on that. I think it's just now you can create it with a higher degree of polish because of tech. So you can do something you can put a 3D animation together. You don't have to be Pixar. You can paint with like huge canvases, and you don't have to have a massive studio to be able to do that. I think when I was in art school, this was in the early days, and it was frowned upon, digital tools. But I was always in the mind that these are what they are. They are tools. They don't replace your creativity. So if they took those digital tools away, all those people that does beautiful work on whatever software they do can still do beautiful work regardless, because a colored pencil or some paints would help them. I think what it has done is allowed more people to appreciate things. So allowed people who wouldn't have access to art or design to have access. So if you're out in the middle of nowhere, so I grew up in the middle of a desert, it's nice to be able to see artwork from New York, say for example, or some design pieces made in Berlin, or some graphic design stuff from like Dublin, and being able to constantly see all this inspiration. I think that's really nice. I think that's what's helped inspire a lot of people and be more creative. So remember, these are just tools, as any other tool you can use, but I think, yeah, it does help them create a little more polish, I guess.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to hear, because I think like I've not really come from that much of a creative background at all, but I just think because it is so easy now to, well, I say it's easy to create stuff. I'm not very good at creating stuff myself yet, but hopefully you give me a few years and maybe I'll get there. But it's so much easier than it ever has been before anyway, to like just follow a few instructions online, get the right software. And I feel quite lucky really that I've been able to like use these, have access to this software like Photoshop, or all the different Adobe products really. But if you have access to those and you've got access to YouTube, you're kind of sorted, to be honest, because you really can just follow tutorials. Like that's all you really need to do nowadays. Sort of on that point, actually, do you think there is like any innate skill involved in design, or do you think like someone could be born with no skill in it at all, without that sort of creative eye, and then become a really great sort of graphic designer, for example?
There's no denying that some people are born with a sort of a visual sense. They may be more visual learners, or maybe that's how they grew up in the world, because, say, for example, they had dyslexia and using things visually helps them understand things a bit better. But as I said, anyone could be creative. It just takes time and hard work, like anything else in the. If you want to become an amazing musician, like, yeah, there are those prodigy kids out there. They're one in a million, but there's some brilliant musicians out there otherwise. And all it takes is just doing your craft every day, working at it, learning new stuff, going on YouTube and finding out what other people are doing, learning from them. I don't never think that creativity or design is innate. You might have a slight advantage, but I think it's about your brain, how you look at things. You can train your brain, you can improve it. Take drawing classes, go out, take photos, just work on stuff. I think it's I've never been everyone you meet sometimes they say, "Oh, I'm not very creative," or "I'm not being very creative." I think a lot of times it's because you're told not to be in jobs. You're told not to be creative, not to do things your way, not to understand it. If you go back to, say, every single one of those people's drawings from when they were a kid, the confidence in their drawings is you can see it, like the confidence in coloring, the confidence in their line, confidence in composing a lot of pictures, because they didn't have that sort of, one, they didn't have the feeling that they were being judged, and one, two, they didn't have the feeling that it's not allowed. It's something that they leave in their childhood, and yeah, a lot of jobs don't allow for that creativity, but maybe they should allow for some, so that people feel a little more in control over their lives, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear. I think as you get older, obviously there's more like social norms to conform to, and so
Yeah.
you can feel a bit constrained, especially if you take a job where you have like a boss and a real hierarchical or structure. So it can be quite difficult. You kind of just feel
Yeah.
like everything's outside of your own control. With design, you do have that creativity and freedom. I think one thing that I personally find it kind of lacks in a sense, and that you would get if you was like maybe an accountant, for example, is that sort of objective answer whether you've done right or not. Because with like maths, for example, whether it's yes or no. With design, it's so subjective, and you could always kind of make things a little bit better. You can never really get that absolute 100%, and so it can be difficult in a sense in that way at times, because like I'm not great at this point. My aim is to get a lot better at design by following plenty of YouTube videos and just trying to work hard really. But right now it's like I probably do need a little bit of feedback at times, and because you don't have the answer yes or no, whereas with something a bit more quantitative, or I don't know what the right word is, but it's like you can define something as like either definitely, yeah, you've
Yeah.
done the job right or wrong, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like the sort of, yeah, 1 + 1 = 2. That yeah, that's definite answer, as opposed to more of a sort of, um, I don't feel that text is giving off the right readability, for example. I think we're getting better at design. I think it's still quite subjective, but we know what we're looking for now. We know what works and what doesn't work. And we test and test and test anything. So, like, for example, your piece of work, you can put it out. And I think it is that feedback loop. You just need to put it out, test often, and to get other people to look at it and go, I'm not sure about the colors, or I am not sure about how that's working. I don't know if people can read that, and then you incorporate, bring it back, incorporate, bring it back. The real test of design working is, one, people don't notice it. They shouldn't really notice the design of your work, because say for example you're doing a website, the interface should be intuitive. They should just be able to do what they need to do, enjoy the experience of what they want to do. And I'm not saying aesthetics is not important. That is part of the journey, but I'm saying that it should be a point where they don't notice the design. They shouldn't be noticing, the rounded corners of a box. They shouldn't be noticing, but they will notice when things are not right. And that's, I think, is the hard part to find. But again, with testing, you could put it out there. People say, that doesn't feel right. And you go, okay, let's have another look at that. That's design, I think, in a nutshell. And I mean, unlike art, where you are sort of creating a message for people to interpret, in design, we are actually still creating things for people to use, see, make comprehension on. And that's the real test. That's our test. That's how you test design. Put it out there and see if it works. And most of the time it does, man. Most of the time it doesn't. I don't know, but yeah, it's tough. And I always think, you always get the flashy designers, but like they put all sorts of stuff up, but then half the time it's like, yeah, but is it good design? Because Mr. Briggs next door with his big glasses finds it difficult to read your website, even though it looks beautiful. It's not really helpful to him because he can't use anything. Yes, it is annoying to a designer going, but it looks aesthetically amazing. But then you've also go, yeah, but Granddad next door can't read any of it, so it's useless.
I think another thing, just on the point of like design, one thing that I do sort of love about it is over time you like accumulate more and more tips. So like with Photoshop or After Effects, which I've been working in recently, it's like I'll come across a tutorial and it's like, oh, that's nice. Like I want to try and use that. Okay. And then once you've got that tip, it's like you've unlocked a new character on a game. And it's like you can always use that character. You can always use that tip, in the future. And it's like you just kind of build up these like characters, these layers of just design technique that you can use in the future. And like I'm very new to it, but I feel like over time, if you just keep going with it, you'll get to a point where you like almost complete the game. And it's like you can just go into any level with any character anytime you want. And it's like, okay, I feel like that's kind of the end goal. But then maybe the game develops as well. And so there's more new tips and more characters to unlock once you get to a certain point. And, bring out a new episode, like a new software or whatever.
There's always the end game of creating that perfect piece and knowing a software in and out, but you'll never get there. And I think that's the joy and fun of doing it, is that you'll never get there because you constantly will always there'll always be something else to learn. There's always a new shortcut. When I was in my early stage of designing stuff, I used to like, why do people use shortcuts? The buttons are right there. There's no point using the shortcuts. When you get into work, you suddenly realize, yes, use all the shortcuts. Speeds up your work. You can concentrate on other stuff now. I mean, like, that's something that's changed my mind. I was like, oh, all right. Now you got this weird language you've all learned to use in Illustrator, for example, that helps you move around a lot quicker and do what you need to do. But yeah, I think software will always develop. You will always need to keep learning new stuff, and I think that's the fun part of it. Is that you're always a beginner almost every time. You go, right, oh, something new. I don't know how this works. And then you're a beginner again. And it's put you in that mentality again. It's quite nice to be there, because then it goes, I can't make any mistakes because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how it works. So I can make as many mistakes and experiment how this works.
Yeah, I think like just kind of on quite a broad basis, two of my favorite things then about design would be that you have the opportunity to be creative, which you don't get in many jobs, and you also have the ability to be forever learning, like just continuously learning all the time, because there's always stuff you can learn, and you don't really get those two things that creativity and learning in that many jobs. I think they're two things that are probably really important in anyone's career. But to go into maybe a bit more detail on your advice for any sort of designer who wants to get into design, because I feel like we have spoke about a few benefits of it. There might be people potentially listening going, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind getting into maybe design. What would be your like top three pieces of advice for anyone who does want to get into design?
Top three. Number one, don't listen to me. Don't listen to all these stuff. This is how you get into design. This is the top tips you need to learn, or these are the top skills, because they will always change. I think you need to be interested in solving problems and puzzles. I think I did another interview where I said exactly the same thing. You've got to want to do a good puzzle, because that's what design is in essence. You're given something by a client, whatever it is, and you've got to take those pieces, which some are missing, some are mislabeled, some have disappeared down the back of the couch, and you've got to put something together so that someone else can understand and work, and the client is happy with what the outcome is, and whatever it comes out as is. It's got lots of iterations. It's got a lot of oh, this didn't work. Oh, that doesn't work. I think you just got to be able to be a fun lover of puzzles and know that you will not get it first time. You'll never get it first time. But I mean, if we're asking how to get into the industry, which is probably what everyone wants to know.
You can't go into an interview and be like, I love jigsaws. That's probably not going to work.
Well, it depends on where you're doing this. Jigsaw factory might be quite good. I've to get into this industry, have a portfolio of your work you've done for other people, freelance. And if you don't have like any clients, or you've not worked for any big companies because you're just at the start of your career and there's not much, and you've got what you've got in college, but it's not that great, and you're thinking, just start creating your own briefs at that point. Start putting something together, create your own little mini projects. So whether it's in motion design, create your own show reels or create your own movie. I mean, that's what's great about technology, is that if you're in animation or if you're doing anything on video, you can stick it out there and let people see it without having to go through the hoops of a big production company or going to a job to get the facilities. Get a good portfolio and keep doing work and keep learning from that work. I think I recently went to a conference where it basically says, and we're always told not to do free work. But there's certain things you can do free work for. So anything with social benefit or charity, they're always, you're not going to get paid. It doesn't pay the bills, but you've got a client that are happy or are likely to be happy with most things you produce, because they don't have those things in house. They don't have the money to spend on a designer or UX or a visual designer or a motion designer, whatever type of designer you are. So going out to those people and helping them. So you're not only helping yourself, you're also helping a good cause, and you're adding stuff to your portfolio. So always have a portfolio. 2, the tip I always get whenever like you're supposed to hire for a design role, especially myself, is to hire people better than you, which seems counterintuitive. It's like, oh, but I'm the head of creative, so I should be the top. I should be the best artist. Yeah, but it shouldn't be that way. It should be that the people you hired around you are better than you, and then you can learn from them, and they can learn from each other. I think best place I always find I enjoy learning is when I was at art college. I think I did my best, not my best work, but I felt at most open because there was loads of people doing loads of different stuff, and then I was pulling all the experiences from around me. So that's tip 2. Experience life, do things. Just go out and find and do things. We can become so caught up in our daily lives that sometimes you could just, if you've always wanted to skydive, go for it. Just go skydiving. I know it's not that easy. But just start doing things, because sometimes waiting around and not doing them is worse. Because I'm a forever procrastinator on stuff. But going out, that's the other part of design. It's just experiencing life, because how can you design anything if you don't know what people do and how people react, and what stuff is out there, and what's it like under the sea, and all the inspirations you could do. Go out there and find, because it's so easy to be just stuck on Pinterest and go, oh, that's pretty. Oh, that's pretty. That's really nice. I really like how that looks. Instead of just going out there and going, trees. Sunshine. Oh, air.
Oh, that's interesting advice to me, because when I look for inspiration for my designs, so often I just go online and try and find something fairly similar and then think, oh, I wonder if I could replicate that, but in this way instead. That's probably not a great way to start. Do you think going outside in the real world helps more?
I think looking at other people's work does help a bit. I think we can get quite caught up in it sometimes. You quite caught up in trying to follow a style or try to follow a particular way a photo has been taken, or and you become derivative of most of it, like a poor copy of whatever that is. That's fine for learning. I think that's perfect. Do lots of that. Copy other people when you're learning. You'll learn new techniques of how to, say, draw a particular line or how to take a particular picture. It's brilliant but understand that you are copying other people's work and you're being quite derivative of that type of work. What you need to do is I guess not only just go out there and try and find other things to inspire you, like this plot nature, for example, massive inspiration. Or it just is the way that someone's coat looks while sat in a cafe. You go, I really like that pattern. That's a really good pattern. That's why a lot of designers out there, but luckily have a camera in their pocket at all times. You can just go, that looks really good. I'm going to keep that, and keep a bank of those type of images stored away on your computer. So every so often you can jump back into it. Even old projects, keep them stored on your computer. The ones that clients have rejected, because you never know, like later down the line, you go, wait a minute, I drew a bear that was really similar for this project, and go back to that and see what you got. And then you can go back to like, it would be really cool using that old man's patterned coat on top of that. That'd be really cool. So that's pulling lots of stuff from experiences, using the knowledge you've built up from copying other people and learning those techniques, and just pulling all those things together. It's tough at the start, but yeah, it's something you do, going out there, get those experience, get those weird photos of grass and gravel and texture photos and cool patterns, and there's lots of stuff out there, or way people interact with each other, or funny designs on like ice cream trucks or something like that. All that type of stuff is it's a better inspiration for your ongoing work, because it doesn't become so like you're trying to copy someone else.
Yeah, it's a little bit more, well, it's just more refreshing really to get out there in the world rather than just stay online. And you're going to be more creative if you go for a walk. Like when I was doing best with my own sort of online business about a year ago, or maybe even longer ago now, that was when I was just like going on walks every day, just in nature. That really was when I was being like doing the very best, because I was just so much more creative. My other question for you then, just going off what you were saying about how one of the best times for you was when you were surrounded by people who were kind of all interested in art and design, and you were taking ideas from them, or sort of just seeing what they were up to. And you have this saying that like you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's some sort of saying as well. And how important do you think like collaboration is in design?
Collaboration is super important. Whether it's just feedback from people around you, or working with other creatives, and it's tough. And I have tried to work on this, because I'm quite an introvert. I don't like networking that well. So if you stick me in a room, I need to put a lot of energy in being social. So I get drained really quickly through the day. Like, all right, I'm done talking to people and finding interesting people, but I just need some time for myself just to recoup. So it's tough. I think it is tough. And I remember talking to someone saying it's like everyone just always assumes that because you're a designer or illustrator or an artist that you're always extrovert and talking to lots of people. But sometimes it's hard for a lot of those people. And talking and meeting new people is quite draining. But I do think I've always been told is that you do need to surround yourself with a bit more creative people, like and talk to them, interact with them. And then I guess my own fears of I get that sort of imposter syndrome, that type of thing, like where you think you don't belong somewhere, like you've cheated the system by being there, you're not good enough to be there, or you shouldn't be there because, and I think a lot of creators will know that exact feeling, like that self-doubt of am I good enough? Why am I here? All these people are a lot better than me, but I'm higher than them. They're expecting me to be better than them. That sort of, that fear hits you when you're talking to a lot of like when I start talking to like there's loads of people do beautiful work out there, and it's intimidating because I think look at my work and it's like it's not that good. It's not as good as their work. I think, and then when you actually do meet them, it's just like, yeah, so what? But we both like, you know, designing dinosaurs. That's all right. It doesn't matter. And I think, yeah, we build up all this sort of internal fear when meeting other people, and I think it's hard to get out of, especially with an introvert. But collaborating with other people, meeting other creative people, especially, like, will help you a lot, even if you don't understand it at the time. So you should go to those meets and meet those people, because there could be that one point where they suddenly go, and you're down in your luck, and they ring you up and go, look mate, I've got I don't know, Sony on the line. They need some new characters for their box art. I'm busy, so would you mind, I've seen some of your work, you going for it, and giving that sort of heads up. And I think that's also how Hive works. We build those relationships with our clients, so they become, I don't want to sound cliche, but like our friends, but they become like a part of the sort of work we do. And it does become a case of, he's like, oh, I know some guys, they Hive work did some work for me and they were really good. And then we get that. And I think that's where we get our most satisfying jobs, is from word of mouth recommendations. And by being collaborative, you might actually get a lot of those word of mouth collaboration type things. I rambled.
No, it's good to hear. I mean, I can definitely relate, like, obviously, to the whole sort of maybe overthinking things a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I personally overthink all my work so much, like so far anyway. And it's hard to get out of your own head sometimes and just be like, okay, we're going to put this out. And it doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. And I think the thing you've got to consider is like, how many hours have I actually spent sort of working on this? How many hours have I spent working on design in general? How many hours have I spent in Photoshop or Illustrator or After Effects? And you've got to take that into account, because if you're ever thinking, this person's better than me at this or that, you've got to consider, well, how did they get to that position? Because they're not necessarily better than you. As we said earlier, it's not like they're born innately better than you at design. It's just that they may have spent more hours on that practice than you, and you might have spent more hours on something else. And that's just how life works. So it's being aware of that, which is important. And it's so much easier to say it on a podcast like this than to actually implement that in your life. Because I know after this podcast, I'll think, right, how do I go and put this podcast out next, or whatever, and like, what can I do to improve this? It's difficult.
That is an important thing. As the other thing I learned is basically don't be precious about anything, any piece of art, no matter how many hours you have put into something. Know that it's likely to be ripped apart, or in fact, I used to always go with clients into a meeting whenever I did a piece of work and sort of cut them off before they ripped my designs apart by saying, you can rip my designs apart. It made me feel like I had a little more control over it, even though I didn't. But I think having that type of criticism on your work, it can sting quite badly. I think having that thick skin is good for a designer, because it's like, people won't like your work. Mr. Boss in the corner might hate it, but it doesn't make it bad work. No. Does it make it good work? No. It means it's work that constantly evolving, and just don't be precious about it. And that's tough too. Like, you put tons of hours into something and you're like, yes, looks perfect. And then you send it out to someone else and they go, it's nothing I like. This doesn't work at all. And that can be like a devastating blow, because you're like, I put so much work into this. It's a killer. But you've just got to go, right, park that at the side, that feeling at the side for a bit. I'll invest in that feeling later on in the night when I'm like, I don't know, playing COD or something like that. what I will do now is listen to why. Ask those questions. Go, so what doesn't work for you on this, or what are you expecting on these particular things, or how is it not fitting for your target audience? Start pulling your own design apart. So it's like, what is it? Something about the text? Is the font the wrong choice? Is it saying this or is it saying this? And ask those questions, and you find that you start collaborating with the client just as much as you do with other creatives, which is important as well, because they should also feel like the work you're doing reflects them as well, because they've got bosses to show this to, and they get criticized for work. And it's a never-ending cycle, but sometimes it's good to have some criticism.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was the first or one of the main questions that you asked me for my interview at Hive. You said, like, how do you respond to criticism? And I gave you some kind of spiel about how, I don't mind because you learn from it, and that's important to me. So yeah, I do think like just kind of being okay with that. Sometimes you do need to put your emotions to one side for a little while. But I think it's because I think the reason why we can be a little bit sensitive at times to criticism or feedback on design is because it can be like a reflection of your own identity or your own work. And so it's like quite personal. And I think that's maybe one of the main problems. I think like just with this is getting a little bit deeper now, but I guess the podcast is, there is an intention to go a little bit deeper. But I think capitalism in a way sort of promotes or sort of results in us all having a bit more of an identity. And so that's why we can be a little bit more sensitive to criticisms of our work. But if we didn't have such a strong identity, and if we were more just like, okay, this is me in the moment, my work doesn't really say anything about me. I'm just like a living person. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why anyone's here. I don't know why Earth even exists. Then maybe you'd kind of detach from your identity a little bit, and maybe that would result in people not procrastinating as much. This is probably something that I need to start to listen to myself, these sort of ideas about how my existence isn't really as, like it's just ego driven again. Like it's just my ego being out of control probably, which is why I care about some of my work too much.
I think it depends on the culture. Yeah, we do grow up in what psychologists call a loose culture. So self-identity is a very important part of a loose culture. So loose cultures are generally like America is a loose culture where the focus is on being an individual and finding your own path, striking it out to you on your own. All the big things, finding your dreams, that type of stuff. And then you have your sort of tighter cultures, I think they're called. So these are more communal based. So I think a lot of them are in Asia, so that everything's done as a committee. You tend to follow more rules, but because you follow more rules, you're more in tune with the people around you, because you know how everyone works and how the protocol for doing a business meeting is the same regardless of what you are. You have your greeting, you do this, you say this, and there's a certain sense of structure to everything. And in those societies, they have their advantages, so that they're less about the individual, they're more about the collective, getting together, being the community, supporting each other. Different ways of looking at stuff, but in our culture, it's about being the individual. You stick it in your work, and it can hurt when someone criticizes it. I think you just have to separate yourself in that moment when you get that criticism. Like I've been in uni critiques where someone's put a lot of effort into a particular piece of work, and the tutors kind of just ripped it apart, and you can see them well up, and it's hurt them a bit. I think sometimes a tutor needs to be careful that when you're doing the criticism of someone, that is their work, and it's not a slight on them. It's just on the work, and you might need to say that at the start of every time you do it. But on the other side, you do need to separate your work out from yourself. So you have put a lot of personal effort in, you've created that character, you've made it look like this, but know that someone else might not like it, or might not fit what the brief is. So I don't know. It's a tough one. I think remember that, you remember in criticism, it's not about you, it's about the work. they're not actually attacking you, unless they are actually attacking you. Then it's about you and not the work. But yeah, just keep that in mind. Yeah, it'll hurt a bit, but that's what you have to pay sometimes.
Yeah, it is challenging, but I suppose in any field where you have room to be creative, there's always you always have to be a little bit more vulnerable, perhaps.
Yeah.
And that just comes with the job. And obviously there's benefits to that as well, because on the flip side, when you do some great work, it's like you can really feel proud of yourself. You gain a sort of sense of fulfillment or achievement within yourself. It's like, I know that I only really started using After Effects maybe about 6 weeks ago, just before I got this job, because I knew I need to use it for this job. So I just took like an online course, and although the video that I recently created isn't like anywhere near as good as I'd like it to be, I did feel a real sort of sense of achievement once that was finished, because, you know, I've worked hard and tried to build that over the last 6 weeks. So pros and cons to it. And I guess if you didn't have the cons, you didn't have people saying, no, you need to do this better, then the pros of doing good work wouldn't feel quite as sweet.
Yeah. I think it also helps that whoever's saying those things also doesn't say it like, you need to do better. What does that mean?
It has to be constructive.
Yeah, I think it has constructive. It has to be respectful as well. I think a lot of people forget that when they're giving feedback. It needs to be something like, so yeah, I like it, but I don't think that works. Or maybe we could try something different, or try and get them to think it in a different way. I think I've been lucky when I was learning After Effects to be in a production company. So I had people around me that knew the software inside out. They were like some of the best animators I've met. They weren't the best illustrators, which is the skill I brought to them. So like there was an intermingling. So I would draw stuff out and they would help me put it all together and how it would work to the software. And having those people, surrounding myself with those people has helped a lot. I mean, like that's what you don't get when you're sitting on a YouTube and learning by yourself. You don't have 6 other people sat around you going, maybe you can try doing it like this. And like having that sort of expertise on tap is a beautiful thing sometimes. And yeah, so if you're out there and you're creative and you're learning a piece of software, talk to some of the experts, ask for some tips and advice, and have them look at your work. Yeah, you might not get the response you want. They might rip it apart even. But if they're good and they're good people, they will help you a ton. They will point out things you could do, things you could learn, and how to upskill that skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not in any at the moment, but I'm sure there's plenty of communities out there on social media or just out there on the internet where, you know, you can join and you can give each other advice and help each other with various projects to do with design. Do you know of any actually, Alan?
Behance tends to be quite a happy community, though you don't get much feedback on stuff other than, oh, this looks great.
What's it called? Sorry.
Behance, I think they're owned by Adobe. So if you're in the Adobe ecosystem, they're up there, but not sponsored. But yeah, I think there's people out there that will give good. I think just talking to some of the big players, there's some great people on Twitter. Twitter is actually a quite useful tool in that fact. Like there's some great artists out there that will genuinely give you some decent feedback. Maybe not straight away, because they probably have a million people now asking them for feedback because of this one lowly podcast. By the way, if you have any feedback about us, whether we're not doing anything right, whether our mics are off, or maybe just speed things up or slow things down or talk about something different, just give us those advice. Send it across to. Do we have an email?
You can send it to my email. Should I say my email now? There's no
Go.
Okay, it's tom@hiveit.co.uk.
Yeah, send all the abuse to him. Send me all the praise. No. Send Tom some praise, because he's pretty much just set this all up. And I've let him just loose on this ever evolving podcast to see where it goes. So even this is a design experiment to see how it works, how we move forward. We're not precious, so give us that feedback. We'll be thick-skinned. Don't worry,
exactly.
Tom.
We have to be after what we've been saying over the last.
We will hold hands while reading the hurtful comments you give us.
I'm nervous.
But yeah, this is our own little design experiment. See how it works, what people want to listen to. See, this is how and getting that feedback from hopefully the more than one listener out there will help us get better at what we do, or at least get Tom the steer that we need to see where we can go with this.
Exactly. I think we'll go for one final question and then we'll wrap it up. So
cool.
We've been talking a fair bit about design, technology, how the world is changing, and so on. Why do you think that design is so important?
Why do I think design? It isn't, and it is. It isn't important. It's something we've put together. This is controversial. Design isn't important. Don't become a designer. Yeah, it's a tough one. Design is design's always been around for ages. Through nature, for example, has been its own designer for millennia and created us humans in the prospect. And I guess we've taken on the sort of, we become self-aware, we've created a sort of design element in our lives. I guess design, I've said design so many times in that last sentence.
It's a design podcast, it's okay.
That's all right. Design is important and isn't important at the exact same time, because it's us, I guess, as humans and how we interact with the world, whether it's through technology, whether we design the technology we interact with the world, whether it's the tools we use that we've designed to interact with the world. Design's important because it's about us, and it's about how we work with things and how we can make things better, hopefully, but it can be how we can make things worse as well. Design isn't always good. Design is always bad. So that's why I don't think it's important in the sense that people put importance on it. I think it's an integral part of our lives, and it can go either way. You can design for good and you can design for bad. And there's plenty of examples out there for designing to manipulate people. That isn't good, but in essence, that is design, and that's the way it works.
I think good design is as good as its purpose, if that makes sense. So if you're creating good design for the right reasons, then it's good design. But you could create really good design for the wrong reasons, and maybe that'd make it bad design.
Yeah. See, it's design in itself is a hypocritical concept that's innate in us. Good design. Say for example, a missile is designed to full spec, does what it needs to do. It goes, it flies, goes and lands, it explodes. But is it good design in the fact that it kills people essentially? Or is it bad design because it kills people? It's hard to describe why you would call it. It does what it's intended to do, but I wouldn't describe a missile as I wouldn't have a picture of a missile on my wall, would I? But essentially that's something that's been designed. It's designed to do something. And I guess that's a tough one. This is why like I said, I don't feel design should have an importance. It is there. It's always there. It's part of what we do, is how we interact with things. And as I said, nature has already done most of the hard work and heavy lifting in design by just being there and functioning. Our bodies are a massive design mess of evolution that we all think is special, but in essence we're just a bunch of meat bags moving around. But don't, not to put anyone off. Design is important, and if we have an understanding of how humans work, and we're designing for the improvement of how those humans work, that's the importance. That's the direction design should go. But then, as I said, there's always the opposite way that design can go, and it's used to manipulate people into spending more, or like loot crates, for example. That's a design decision that was made. And there's people that teach those design decisions and how to push those on younger and younger people, and that isn't good. That's not good at all. So maybe that just design needs a sort of moral code behind it somewhere. I don't know. It's a much bigger. Maybe that's a future podcast debate, because that was a tough question.
I was thinking about that. Once I asked the question, I was like, oh dear, what have I done here? Because I think a better question would have been probably, is design important? And there's just so much to talk about. The internet as a whole, right, is everything on the internet is being designed in a better way continuously. Everything's looking nicer, websites look better. You have YouTube, you have all these amazing videos now, and there's so much information, and that is amazing. But that's kind of in a virtual world in a way. I mean, it is a real world, but the internet is not quite as tangible as my breath right now, or it's really hard to describe. And so if you don't think that as a whole is a good thing, then making better design on the internet, which attracts people to the internet, may not necessarily be a good thing. And oh god, it gets so deep, doesn't it? But so quickly.
Then we are. There's a generation that love the tangible stuff, but there soon will be a generation that aren't so hooked on having something tangible. There's probably kids these days that probably will never buy a Blu-ray or DVD, which is weird, or video, or however, Betamax, VHS, cassette tape, physical media anymore, and probably won't even own. Say, for example, if you wanted to own Snow White on there's probably a generation that doesn't even want to own that because they just pay a service to watch that, and they don't actually own. They lease it almost. We've almost become a sort of lease culture where our software is all digitally online. So what happens when that company disappears? We lose it all, or it gets closed down. It's an interesting time because we're moving away from the fact of owning something, having a possession, to almost paying someone for the privilege of touching using a particular service or using a particular thing. Because, say, for example, cars, or there will be a point where people won't buy a car for their household. They will just lease a car or hire a car because it just works out more economically viable that way. People won't own things, so that tangibleness disappears. Like that, books almost disappear, or picking up something else that's tangible that I can't think of at this point in time.
It's crazy. I haven't touched on NFTs either.
Yeah.
Anyway, we should probably wrap this up. It's actually been a longer podcast than I expected.
Yeah, it's been good. I'm happy to just talk about stuff like this whenever.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll probably get you on again soon then. But yeah, to anyone listening, thanks so much for listening. This has been the first ever Make Things Better podcast. Hopefully we'll make this podcast better as well. Appreciate you guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.